Places the U.S. government warns not to travel right now. You may want to reconsider traveling to these countries right now. The U.S. State Department issues travel advisory levels for more than 200 countries globally, continually updating them based on a variety of risk indicators such as health, terrorism, and civil unrest. Travel advisory levels range from Level 1, which means exercise normal precautions, to Level 4, which means do not travel there. Nearly 20 countries, or about 10%, have a Level 4, do not travel advisory as of March 20th. In Level 4 countries, the U.S. government may have very limited ability to step in should travelers' safety or security be at risk, according to the State Department. Crime, civil unrest, kidnapping, and terrorism are common risk factors associated with Level 4 countries. For Americans traveling from the U.S. to Mexico were kidnapped in early March. The 2 survivors and the bodies of the other 2 victims were discovered on March 7 in the Mexican state of Tamaulipas, one of 6 Mexican states on the Do Not Travel list. The U.S. State Department issues separate travel advisory levels for each of Mexico's 32 states. Crime and kidnapping are the primary risk factors for states across the country. Since February 13, the State Department updated or renewed the Level 4 advisories for Myanmar and Russia, but no new countries joined the Do Not Travel list. Civil unrest, wrongful detention, and health concerns are the primary risk factors for Myanmar, while the risk factors for Russia include terrorism and kidnapping. Travel advisory levels by country. The U.S. State Department issues travel advisory levels based on factors such as crime, terrorism, and civil unrest. Specific areas may receive a different level than the overall country. Afghanistan. The Central Asian country is wrestling with armed conflict, civil unrest, crime, terrorism, and kidnapping, according to the State Department. U.S. citizens are specifically at risk for violence or kidnapping. In December 2022, the government reinstituted public floggings and executions, and women's rights are disappearing under Taliban control. The U.S. Embassy in Kabul halted operations in August 2021. Belarus. Belarus, Russia's neighbor, has been flagged for arbitrary enforcement of laws, the risk of detention, the Russian military attack on neighboring Ukraine, and the buildup of Russian military in Belarus along the border with Ukraine. The U.S. Embassy in Minsk halted operations in February 2022. Burkina Faso. Terrorism, crime, and kidnapping are plaguing this West African nation. Terrorist attacks may target hotels, restaurants, and schools with little to no warning, and the East and Sahel regions of the country are under a state of emergency. Central African Republic. While there have not been specific incidents of U.S. citizens targeted with violence or crime, violent crime and sudden closure of roads and borders is common. The advisory states that Embassy Bangi's limited capacity to provide support to U.S. citizens, crime, civil unrest, and kidnapping is a factor in its assessment. Myanmar, formerly Burma. Armed conflict and civil unrest are the primary reasons to not travel to this Southeast Asian country, which experienced a military coup in early 2021. COVID-19 restrictions, limited healthcare resources, wrongful detentions, and areas with landmines and unexploded ordnance are also listed as risk factors. Gaza. Hamas, a foreign terrorist organization as designated by the State Department, controls much of the Gaza Strip, which shares borders with both Israel and Egypt. Terrorism, civil unrest, and armed conflict are the primary risk factors. The advisory states that sporadic mortar or rocket fire and corresponding Israeli military responses may occur at any time. Haiti. Concerns about risk of kidnapping, crime, and civil unrest are all prominent risk factors for Haiti, which borders the Dominican Republic in the Caribbean Sea. The country has experienced a number of natural disasters, which along with economic and social instability, contribute to chronic poverty. In October, the country's prime minister asked for international security forces to help combat ongoing gang violence, stating that the whole country has been taken hostage. The travel advisory states that U.S. citizens should depart Haiti now in light of the current security and health situation and infrastructure challenges. Iran. Kidnapping and wrongful detentions are risk factors for all travelers, while U.S. citizens are specifically at risk for arbitrary arrest and detention. U.S. Iranian nationals such as students, journalists, and business travelers have been arrested on charges of espionage and threatening national security. Iraq. This winter, for the first time in 4 decades, this war-torn Middle Eastern nation hosted the Arabian Gulf Cup, an 8-nation international soccer tournament. But while the country appears optimistic. Libya. Following the end of its dictatorship over a decade ago, Libya has been wrought with internal conflict between armed groups in the east and west. Armed conflict, civil unrest, crime, kidnapping, and terrorism are all risk factors. U.S. citizens have been targets of kidnapping for ransom, with terrorists targeting hotels and airports frequented by Westerners. The U.S. Embassy in Tripoli halted operations in 2014. Mali. After experiencing a military coup in 2020, crime, terrorism, and kidnapping are all prevalent threats in this West African landlocked nation. In July 2022, non-emergency U.S. government employees and their families were ordered to leave the country due to higher risk of terrorist activity. Mexico. Each state in Mexico is assessed separately for travel advisory levels. 6 of the 32 states in Mexico are designated as Level 4, Colima, Guerrero, Michoacán, Sinaloa, Tamaulipas, and Zacatecas. Crime and kidnapping are listed as the primary risk factors throughout the country. North Korea, Democratic People's Republic of Korea. U.S. passports are not valid for travel to, in, or through this country, home to one of the world's longest-running dynastic dictatorships. The travel advisory states that the Level 4 distinction is due to the continuing serious risk of arrest and long-term detention of U.S. nationals. Russia. The travel advisory for Russia cites its invasion of Ukraine, harassment of U.S. citizens by Russian government officials, and arbitrary law enforcement as a few of the reasons for the Level 4 designation. Chechnya and Mount Elbrus are specifically listed as Level 4 regions. Terrorism, civil unrest, health, kidnapping, and wrongful detention are all noted as risks. Russia invades Ukraine, a timeline. Top shot: black smoke rises from a military airport in Chugyev, near Kharkiv on February 24, 2022. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a military operation in Ukraine today, with explosions heard soon after across the country, and its foreign minister warning a full-scale invasion was underway. Somalia. A severe drought resulting from 5 failed rainy seasons in a row has caused food prices to shoot up, putting the East African country at risk of famine amid conflict with Islamist insurgents. Violent crime is common throughout Somalia, pirates frequent its coast off the Horn of Africa, and medical facilities, where they exist, have limited capacity. Crime, terrorism, civil unrest, health, and kidnapping are all risk factors. South Sudan. The advisory states that no part of Syria is safe from violence, with terrorism, civil unrest, kidnapping, armed conflict, and risk of unjust detention all potential risk factors. U.S. citizens are often a target for kidnappings and detention. The U.S. Embassy in Damascus halted operations in 2012. Ukraine. Russian setbacks in their invasion of Ukraine have buoyed hopes in the country for 2023. However, Ukraine is a Level 4 country due to Russia's full-scale invasion, with crime and civil unrest also noted as risk factors. The Ukrainian government declared a state of emergency in February 2022. Related, explainer: why did Russia invade Ukraine? Venezuela. human rights abuses and lack of health care plague this South American nation, which has been in a political crisis since 2014. In 2019, diplomatic personnel were withdrawn from the U.S. Embassy in Caracas. Threats in the country include crime, civil unrest, kidnapping, wrongful detention, and poor health infrastructure. Yemen. 6 of the 9 risk factors defined by the State Department, terrorism, civil unrest, health risks, kidnapping, armed conflict, and landmines, are all present in Yemen. Despite private companies offering tourist visits to the Yemeni island of Socotra, the U.S. government argues those arranging such visits are putting tourists in danger. Civil war and cholera are also both present throughout the country. The U.S. Embassy in Sana'a halted operations in 2015. Between February 13 and March 20, the State Department updated travel advisory levels for more than one. Other countries to watch. Between February 13 and March 20, the State Department updated travel advisory levels for more than 10 countries, adding information about specific regions or risk factors. Travel advisory levels can change based on several factors in a nation, such as increased civil unrest, policies that affect human rights, or higher risks of unlawful detention. The State Department has given more than 30 countries an assessment of Level 3, meaning it recommends people reconsider travel to those destinations. One of those 30 Level 3 countries is China. The Asian powerhouse became a Level 3 country in late 2020 and remains at that level due to the surge in COVID-19 cases, arbitrary enforcement of local laws, and COVID-19 related restrictions, according to an update in December. While China was able to control the spread of COVID-19 earlier in the pandemic with strict lockdown policies, it has now eased restrictions and is once again grabbing headlines for increasing cases. In early 2023, travelers from China, Hong Kong, and Macau needed to provide a negative COVID-19 test before boarding flights to the U.S., but that order has since been rescinded. Peru, a South American country that has recently been plagued by political violence, is also on the Level 3 list. Protests continue in the country, which is in turmoil following the ouster of a democratically elected president. Nigeria and Uganda both remain on the Level 3 list after a round of updates by the U.S. State Department in January. Nigeria is currently combating a diphtheria outbreak, and Uganda recently announced that the latest outbreak of Ebola is over. Related, explainer, how Peru plunged into political crisis and protests. More than 71 countries are currently at Level 2, meaning the State Department recommends travelers exercise increased caution when traveling to those destinations. Among those countries is Brazil, which has recently grabbed headlines for its political turmoil. On January 8, thousands of far-right supporters of former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro stormed the country's Congress, Supreme Court, and presidential palace to protest the results of the country's presidential election. Brazil, as the largest country in South America, has been designated Level 2 because of crime since April 2022. It had previously been designated Level 4 due to COVID-19. The State Department asks travelers to pay attention to travel advisory levels and alerts, review country information pages for their destinations, and read related country security reports before going abroad.